microphone there.
One of the arguments against reform is that an elected House of Lords would challenge the primacy of the Commons. How would you respond to this criticism?
Well, it shouldn't and it mustn't, and when you see our bill tomorrow, it won't. It's very important that that balance between the primacy of the House of Commons and the role the House of Lords is maintained as it is. The two houses have different roles, and through the legislation that will publish tomorrow, you will see that we are taking steps to ensure that is the case with the reformed House of Lords. But that, I have to say, that argument doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a largely democratically elected second chamber. I think you can have different houses with different responsibilities and different roles, and different mandates and different ways of being elected, but which should still be connected to the views of the people that they seek to make laws on behalf of.
Thank you.
Thank you. If the principle that lawmakers should be elected is so important, why are you agreeing to have bishops remaining in the House of Lords?
Well, again, you will see our bill when it's published tomorrow, but I think throughout this there's been a consensus that we need a House of Lords which is wholly or largely elected. It is important to us, as I said in my speech, if there are compromises that need to be made in order to deliver the main purpose of reform, then we're willing to do that, to build the consensus that needs to be established. I think that particular point was something that was reflected in many of the reports, royal commissions and others which have taken place over the years. So I think it's one of those areas where perhaps a degree of compromise is needed in order to deliver the much wider and more important objective of reform.
I'll take you in the front and then the table just behind you.
Are you here?
Yes.
You've implied this is a government bill, yet all three parties are agreed that the reform is needed. Why is it not a free vote?
Because it's government policy, because it is policy that was reflected in the Liberal Democrat manifesto, the Conservative manifesto, and indeed the Labour Party manifesto for that matter. And we have a responsibility to deliver those policies. I think it's a matter of very great importance to this country, and therefore it's appropriate that it should be delivered as a matter of government policy by government MPs, and indeed, I hope, upon reflection, by Labour MPs too.
Minister, as you imply, election is the principal source of authority into your proposals, but what happens in the event of a logjam between the two chambers? Will the Parliament Act of 1949 still prevail with a one-year delay time? Thank you.
Well, as I say, I think it's important that the details of the policy that the proposals are revealed to the House of Commons first, as they will be moved into Parliament. We publish the bill tomorrow. I respect the role of Parliament in that respect, but I think, as I implied in answer to an earlier question, we are seeking to maintain the arrangements which give primacy to the House of Commons. It's very important that that continues, and it will.
Right, so we've got somebody there, and you here.
Jeff Taylor. Minister, I would... Oh, sorry. There is a report that there was up to 100 Tory MPs who were prepared to oppose the House of Lords bill on the grounds that they wanted to punish the Liberal Democrats for failing to put an MP, a worthy MP, down. There's three prima facie cases of going against code. Would you like to comment on that? And coupled with that, is there anything, bearing in mind what the Health Secretary and the Education Secretary have ridden coach and horses through the coalition agreement. Is there anything which would cause the Liberal Democrats to pull out of government before 1940?
Oh, goodness me, that's a very broad-ranging question.
Let's take the first one first, part one first, and then we'll certainly come on to part two.
I think what I'd say is that both Liberal Democrats and Conservatives have signed up to the coalition agreement, with both parties have voted consistently in Parliament to deliver that. Occasionally, things that have been difficult for some Liberal Democrats, occasionally things that have been difficult for some Conservatives. And what was very striking, as I said in my speech, in the Cabinet session today, was the very strong and united support for these reforms from both Conservatives and Liberal Democrats.
But of course, Boris Johnson's not actually in the Cabinet, but he seems to be leading a rearguard action that's pretty ferocious.
He's not in the Cabinet or indeed in Parliament. So we won't have a vote on these matters. I'm not going to get into offering advice to the Conservative Party's whipping operation. I think that would be a step too far even for a Cabinet Minister. But I think it is important that, that having set out our commitment to this, that members of, with its antecedents in our respective election manifestos, in the coalition agreement, in the agreement with the government to take forward these proposals, that coalition MPs support. It's very, very important.
Part two?
Well, part two was a much broader question. But as I said, we have, what I spend the vast majority of my time working on is dealing with the huge problems in the British economy. That is the sort of founding purpose, if you like, of the coalition government, and we've committed to working together until 2015 to deliver that, albeit there will bound to be difficulties on both sides occasionally along the way, and we will absolutely stick to that because that's what we promised the country that we would do.
So we'll answer right here.
Hello. I work for an environmental organisation, and I'm going to avoid the overwhelming temptation to comment on your continued use of the phrase the greenest government ever, in order to ask that, thinking about wider constitutional reform, obviously there's a movement for votes at 16 and 17, which the Lib Dems had supported, and yet in the Scottish independence referendum you're not backing it for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. I wondered, is that something that the Lib Dems aren't hoping to do anymore, or is it just politically convenient right now?
Well, I've happily engaged with you in a debate on the environment because I think we've lived up to our goal, but perhaps this is the wrong event to do that at. The commitment to vote to 16 is something that was in our election manifesto. It's not something that we signed up to as part of our coalition agreement, because that inevitably reflects compromises between the two parties and things that we can agree on to deliver. I think in relation to the Scottish independence referendum, I don't think it's right to say that you can have a different franchise for a referendum compared to elections for the Scottish Parliament. It should be carried out on the same basis. That's a position we've taken in the discussions with the Scottish Government. I think that is a reasonable and consistent position, because it would be very difficult to say you can have a different franchise cooked up for one particular referendum, but then when we get back to having the Scottish Parliament again, that you revert to the previous franchise. I think there does need to be some consistency in that area.
And so do the Lib Dems still support, in theory, votes at 16 and 17?
It's still our public policy, absolutely.
Right, so take you and then at the back.
Yes, John Strand, I've got to just make a point about the bishops, who I might say are wholly male, not a female amongst them, and don't even represent the United Kingdom, because the Church of Wales and the Church of Ireland have been disestablished, the Church of Scotland is independent, so these people are all from England. So if you're going to have regional elections, you're going to have built-in bias towards the English to start off with. Could you make me that answer that point and justify it? But the question that I'd like to put is one that hasn't appeared, happened at all today, when we've been talking about democracy, and that's Europe. Europe has a huge democratic deficit, and the people that take decisions there, like Barroso, is unelected, unaccountable to the people. Angela Merkel is only elected and accountable to the German people, and as a result, there is a lack of any European-wide democratic legitimacy, and that has caused paralysis in decision-making, and that paralysis is going to continue until it's resolved. What would you be advising Europe to do to resolve that decision-making and to bring back democracy to the people? Remember the European Parliament.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, we got it. Democracy in Europe.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I think on the point about the bishops, I addressed that one earlier, and I'm reluctant to get into territory about disestablishment of churches and so on this occasion. On the European point, I'm not sure I completely agree with you, to be honest. I mean, there is a European Parliament which is elected by populations across the whole of Europe. It has a great deal more power than it once had. It's involved in co-decision in a whole range of areas, and you might not like the way it's elected, or the fact that people don't necessarily know who their MEP is. The turnouts in European elections in this country are lower than they should be, but nonetheless, that is a democratic institution that is responsible for peoples across the whole of Europe. Political parties work together in groups across Europe. My party is a member of the LD group in the European Parliament. There's a party of European Socialists, and there's a European People's Party, and other parties too. So you get some degree of collective views there. But also, we have 27 democratically elected governments who come together in the Council of Ministers. Those are also democratically elected national governments who, rightly, in the way that Europe works, take those decisions collectively. So there's democracy in the elected governments, there's democracy in the European Parliament. So I'm not sure I really share your analysis that the answer to our problems is some sort of directly elected European president.
I'm just going to ask you one question. You mentioned party funding. What is your assessment of the likelihood of getting any kind of deal out of that when it's so much in the Tories' interest to keep things as they are? What sort of progress has been made?
Well, I'm not directly involved in those talks. As you know, there are cross-party talks with representatives of Labour and Democrats and Conservatives going on at the moment. The feedback I hear is that there is good progress being made, but whether that results in the end in recommendations or not, we'll have to wait and see. But there does seem to be some willingness to make progress on that on all sides.
Some of that, yes.
Hi. I guess whether or not you agree with the current programme of government, I think it's really pleasing to see a government minister standing up here and actually moving on an issue that, if you're a Democrat, you've got to support House of Lords reform. And I know that we haven't got fully elected Lords. There's probably a lot of people in the room, and yourself, although you can't say it, would agree with. But I guess what I'd like to hear from you is, what do you feel the public and civil society should do to prove to those anti-reformers who have already been trying to scotch the bill in Parliament should do to actually rally behind this cause and get out there and fight for this much-needed reform?
Well, I'm glad that I've at least been able to convince this audience that House of Lords reform is a good thing. That's a good start. And organisations in this room, the Electoral Reform Society and many others, have got very strong records and indeed in campaigning for democratic change, and have lots of sort of systems and networks established to do that. And I would strongly urge you to deploy those in support of a democratic House of Lords and in support of the bill that we'll publish tomorrow. As I say, I think that the opinion polls show that whilst this is by no means the issue at the top of people's agenda, quite naturally, when you ask people what they think about reform for the House of Lords, you get very large majorities in favour of the British people having a say in choosing the people who make the laws in this country in our second chamber. So I think that in so much as people think about it, they are positive about it, and I hope that organisations in this room can play a role in demonstrating to elected MPs that is the case.
Had you before, but as you're the only one left standing, it better be you again, unless there's anybody else. All right, I'll have you as well.
There's one at the back there.
At the back,
so
yes.
Maybe a way to go ahead.
That'll probably be our last one.
Counting women in.
Hello, yes, sorry. It's just to reiterate a point already made, that you keep emphasising the fact that opinion polls seem to suggest that the large amount of Britons support such a change within the House of Lords. And indeed, you said that the fact that previous attempts to implement change was because of a lack of consensus, and that gaining consensus is important. Is it not then completely backwards to eliminate a referendum if that seems to be a principle that you're basing this largely upon?
I don't think, as I said, I don't think there's any need to enter into the cost or expense of a referendum when you have the simple fact that almost all of the people who are in the House of Commons were elected on manifestos which they stood on, which committed them to reform the House of Lords. You have the vast majority of people, therefore, voting for parties at the last election who are committed to democratic reform of the House of Lords. I don't think there's any need for a referendum. I think it would be an unnecessary distraction and expense. And let's just get on with it. We have the opportunity to get on with it. Let's seize it.
Do you think it would be one?
Yeah.
Would it be difficult? Would it be like the AV referendum, where suddenly the Boris Johnsonites all come in there with loads of money behind them and kind of blow it out of the water with a distorted campaign?
I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that question because I think that it's not necessary, and that what we have a responsibility to do as a coalition government, two parties who are fully committed to delivering House of Lords reform, is to make sure that it's delivered. I think that's our responsibility. That's what we've set out that we're going to do, and I think we need to do it.
And do you think that Labour is going to sabotage it?
Well, I see today, I haven't seen these reports confirmed, but Labour said it will support reform in principle, but vote against the programme motion, therefore allowing opponents of reform kind of unlimited opportunity in the House of Commons to drag out the debates for weeks on end. I don't think that, if that's true, I don't think it suggests the party that's wholly committed, that is as committed to delivering reform as perhaps it's led its supporters to believe. And for those of you who do support that party, I'd urge you to make that point.
Would it still get through, even if they do sabotage the programme motion? Would the time be given, and would you still press on?
Well, you're now asking me to enter into the forecasting business, which we've got the OBR to do on economics, and I'm not going to enter into in other areas. What I'm saying to you is, we are committed as a coalition to delivering that, and we'll need to make sure that we are able to make progress in the face of Labour's problematic views as opposed to with their support. I'd much rather it was with the full support of the Labour Party, because they have been telling us for a very long time that they're committed to an elected House of Lords, and they need to show that.
Now, at the back.
My name's Helena Ward. My organisation is a member of the Alliance for Future Generations, which works to find ways to bring the needs of future generations into democracy in the UK. Like many other members of that alliance, I was quite disappointed that the white paper suggested that we could pursue reform of the function of the form of the House of Lords without debating its functions. And I'd like to ask you why that is the approach that has been taken, and whether it's really realistic, given the current challenges facing our democracy, to have a debate purely on form without entering into a wide public debate on the functions of the House of Lords.
But just let me ask you a bit more then. How would you want the functions of the House of Lords to be defined?
I'm interested in finding ways to both strengthen the House of Lords as a democratic institution, and also to ensure that it brings long-termism or acts as an effective counterweight to short-termism of electoral cycles. I'm not at all convinced that without a debate on the real functions of the House of Lords, simply providing for fixed 15-year terms is going to be enough to ensure that we bring, if you like, the horizon shift that this government is committed to into our system of democracy.
Well, I definitely agree that politicians of all sides need to think more to the long term on a whole range of issues. I think to that extent I agree with your analysis. I actually think, though, that in looking at reform of the House of Lords, just the first point about the democratic mandate is the one that has been the sticking point for over 100 years. And apart from what you just said, for which I have a great deal of respect, it's not demands to change the relationship between the House of Commons and the House of Lords are not a kind of big part of the demand for reform. And actually, we hear much more. And I agree with this, that the principal chamber, the one that is elected across the country in constituencies every years, and which as a result is the basis on which the government was formed, needs to be the prime chamber. That must be right, and it's something that we intend to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for taking all of the questions.